So I like it when a war has a number attached to it, and that number actually makes sense. It's the actual number of years that the conflict lasts. And so this 30 Years' War starts around 1618, ends up in 1648. It is like the other two wars of religion. It's religious in nature, obviously, by name, but it's also a political war. It's kind of related to the new monarchies and how the new monarchies were trying to get more power and take away power from, for the most part, who are they trying to take power from? Number one. Who's powerful besides the monarch?
The church.
The church, sure. So number 4, they might be trying to get more power with the church. But let's think politically, who are they trying to take power from?
The nobles.
Thank you very much. Exactly. So they're trying to get power away from the nobility. That's number 1 in the new monarchies. So it's a religious struggle between Catholics and Protestants of some kind, usually Calvinists, but not exclusively. A political fight between the crown. In this case, it's the Habsburg family, the Holy Roman Emperors, and the princes who run the Holy Roman Empire. And then also, you'll see that this is the most diplomatic of the struggles. In other words, there are multiple other countries intervening in this war and trying to get what they want. And many of them want to simply keep the Holy Roman Empire kind of a joke. They want it to not unify. They don't want it to become a kind of Germany that would maybe dominate Europe. I want to go back to the Peace of Augsburg in 1555 to just remind you that there already was a kind of religious struggle that had happened in the Holy Roman Empire early on between the Lutherans and Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor. And coming out of that conflict, where they kind of seesawed back and forth, in the end, Charles V just gets too tired to continue on fighting, and they come up with this Peace of Augsburg, in which they decided he who rules his religion. If you have a Catholic ruler, you have to be Catholic. If you have a Lutheran ruler, you have to be Lutheran. Or you can do what a lot of monarchs say at this period of time. You can leave. It's kind of like when Ferdinand and Isabella kicked all of the Jews out of Spain. You can either become Catholic or you can leave. So this tolerates just Lutherans and Catholics, and no other kind of Protestant innovation is officially legal. You can imagine that there's a temporary grace period. That is to say, they give rulers a bit of time to decide. Do we want to go Catholic? Do we want to go Lutheran? How do we want to work that out? And then it also gives people the opportunity, once their ruler decides, it gives people the opportunity to stay or leave. After that, there should really be no switching around. There shouldn't be a ruler who, started off Catholic and decides to become Lutheran, or a territory or a ruler that started out Catholic, or started out Lutheran and decides to become Catholic. Yeah, Danielle.
What about in England when every one of them became
That's exactly it, right? He who rules his religion. And so if you have a Edward VI who's a really strong Protestant, everyone's supposed to become a strong Protestant. He dies. They have 4 or 5 years of Mary, Bloody Mary. She's strongly Catholic, so everybody has to become Catholic. And then for those people, they generally stay put. They're really not going any places. Some of the Puritans actually do leave to go to the Netherlands for a little bit, and then, as you know, some of the Puritans end up here as well. But that's a perfect example of that. Sadly, though, Augsburg gets ignored over the next 50, 60 years. And you had rulers, for the most part, who started off as Catholics with Catholic territories becoming Lutheran. And they're doing that, you can think about how controlling religion and controlling revenue and controlling the nobility, even among a smaller territory, you get a lot more control if you're Lutheran. You don't have to listen to a pope. You don't have to fight with the pope over anything. You get all the monasteries and convents. You don't have the church tithe leaving your lands. So there's some benefits to becoming Lutheran, and a number of these states in the Holy Roman Empire were doing that. In addition to that, a couple of the rulers had decided, for whatever reason, that they really liked the message and theology of Calvinism. And so they illegally became Calvinist. And one of the rulers who became illegally Calvinist was from a really pretty important place called the Palatinate or Palatine. The Palatinate is, and you got to see it here. This always makes me a little bit uncomfortable. This green bit is part of the Palatinate, and then this other sort of orangey bit is another part of the Palatinate. What's weird about this to me, and I think to you, is when you see a ruler's territory, don't you expect a chunk of territory rather than a splatter of territory? But that's essentially what the Holy Roman Empire is. It's just a whole bunch of different splatters of territory. So this ruler, Frederick IV, he's a count. He's not a prince or a king or anything. He's a count. He's the ruler of the Palatinate, and he, like I said, he decided to become Calvinist. He's a little bit worried about that, though, and he does form a defensive alliance called the Protestant Union in 1608. So he asks Lutherans to join him in a kind of defensive alliance in case the Holy Roman Emperor, who's a Catholic, decides to put pressure on them or try to attack them. Another thing you should know about Frederick IV is that he is an elector. There are 7 electors who elect the Holy Roman Emperor. So he is one of the 7 people who decides when the position of Holy Roman Emperor is empty, who that person should be. Oftentimes those guys just get bribed with loads of silver and they vote for somebody. What you're going to see happening over most of European history is this position, the Holy Roman Emperor, is filled by somebody from the Habsburg family, which is what we have going on at this period of time. So the Holy Roman Emperors, these Habsburgs, at one point in time, we had a Habsburg emperor who was king of Spain and Holy Roman Emperor at the same time. He was really quite powerful, Charles V. He split his territories at the end of his reign. He gave the good bit to his son, Philip II, and he gave the maybe not so good bit to one of his brothers. It's the brother who continues ruling, or his line of the Habsburgs, who we're talking about right now. Now, these Holy Roman Emperors want what their cousins in Spain have, a centralized state, a new monarchy. And like their cousins in Spain, they're very Catholic. And so they would like to have the Catholic Reformation occurring in the Holy Roman Empire. They want an end to corruption, and then they want people to come back to the church. That's essentially what the Catholic Reformation is all about. And eventually, maybe dream come true would be undoing the Peace of Augsburg and making everyone be Catholic again, forcing them to be Catholic really in the end of things. You can see that from this map that, maybe you can see, if I dim the lights a little bit, you probably see colors better than I do. But can you see the difference between the green and the yellow? Good. We color challenge people. Well, you can see that in the north, a lot of the territories are Lutheran, and in the south, a lot of the territories are Catholic. And then you've got these reddish territories that are Calvinist, including the newly Calvinized, or the newly majority Calvinist Netherlands up there on the top left of the United Provinces. Well, I like to remember things by mnemonic device. And my sort of strange mnemonic device for the 4 phases of the 30 Years' War is something that I call bad swordfish. And this comes from, this might have actually happened, or it might just be a lie, but imagine that you go into a restaurant and you order a really expensive fish dish. It's swordfish, costs you a ton of money. You think it tastes good, but after you eat it, later on you realize that it wasn't very good, and maybe you get violently ill, and you have sort of things coming out of both ends of you, and you're really quite miserable. Well, that's kind of like what the 30 Years' War is for the Holy Roman Empire. It is a terribly devastating conflict that makes the people there feel pretty sick. The B in bad swordfish is for the Bohemian phase. Do we know where Bohemia is today? Or what it is today?
Isn't that like the Czech Republic?
Excellent, exactly right. Yeah, so Bohemia is the old word for Czech lands. And so it starts off in Bohemia, lasts a few years there, as successfully completed, and there's a winner to that, but then it keeps on going. There's a Danish phase, that's the D in the bad. And then the SW in swordfish, you might be confused actually. The D for Danish could be, what's another D that we could get confused with for Europe? Just as likely, I think. Yeah, that could be a Dutch phase. It isn't, but it's the Danish phase. I like to think of it as this. After we get done with the Bohemians, these next three things you can eat. If that makes sense. I'll talk about that in just a second. So the Danish phase lasts for a little bit, and then there's the SW, the Swedish phase. Instead of the SW, it could be Switzerland phase. It's not. And then the French phase is well, if you look at the period of time of the French phase, what do you notice? Yeah, it's the end of it, but what else? Longer. It's much longer, yeah. So it's really kind of the international devastating part of things. So you can eat a Danish, right? Delicious pastry. Swedish fish, also maybe delicious. And then there's all kinds of things named French that you can eat, right? French. French meringue, and French onion soup, French bread, French fries, French dressing. Okay, so all those kinds of things. So remember Bohemian, and then it's Danish, Swedish, French. The first three phases are about 5 years each, and then the French phase is really the long one. The whole conflict starts with the Bohemian phase and a new Bohemian king who is a Habsburg, who is also the Holy Roman Emperor. So this guy has been elected to be the Holy Roman Emperor by 7 electors. One of the electors is both the guy in the Palatinate that we talked about. Another one of the electors is the King of Bohemia. Essentially, he's voted for himself to be the Holy Roman Emperor. So he's got both of these positions. His name is Ferdinand, and Ferdinand decides, as a good Habsburg, a good Catholic guy, and a guy who's interested in creating a new monarchy in his territories, he's going to start small with Bohemia, and he's been elected king of Bohemia, by the way, by Bohemian nobles. It's never good to be elected if you want to be a powerful king. Can you imagine that? A much better way of becoming king, and sort of the usual way of becoming king, is what? Being born into it. You know, God wanted you to be king, and therefore you were born into it. This is a bunch of Bohemian nobles said that you should be king and handed you a crown. And then a bunch of other nobles, you included, decided that you should be Holy Roman Emperor. Anyway, he becomes Bohemian king, and he decides to flex his muscles in Bohemia before maybe flexing them outside of Bohemia in the Holy Roman Empire. So what he tries to do is get number 4 in the new monarchy. He tries to get a little bit more control over the church. Now, in Bohemia, there were Catholic churches that were open, and there were also, Lutheran churches that were open, and some Calvinist churches that were open. He decides to shut down some of those Protestant churches illegally. He's not supposed to do that. But he figures he's king now, he's going to try it. Well, the Bohemian nobles don't like this guy that they just elected to be their king flexing his muscles, and so they resist his attempt to control their church in a uniquely Czech way, or a uniquely Bohemian way. They take some of his emissaries, these people that came to parley or to talk with the Bohemian nobles, sent by Ferdinand. They decide to show their displeasure with Ferdinand by throwing him out of a window. three guys, it's two emissaries and a kind of secretary figure, get thrown out of a window at the Prague castle. They're supposed to die, and they don't. And I think I talked about that on the day that we were mentioning these wars of religion. They fall, they scamper away. But this is, attempting to kill somebody who has been sent by the king is cause for war, and a war does break out. I went there a few years ago, and this is the Prague castle. If you ever go to Prague, go to the Prague castle. And I was trying to find the window where these guys had been thrown out of. And so I'm wandering around, and I went up to a security guard who didn't speak German, and he didn't speak English. So I just was really loud, because if you talk loud, people who don't understand your language always understand you. And so I'm like, where is the window where the people were pushed out of? And then he yelled back at me in Czech and told me that the room was closed, but that I could kind of go around and see the window that they had been thrown out of over here. By the way, if you look below the window is kind of the edge here, the middle one, dropping down. Can you see something beneath the window? This thing right here. There's kind of a concrete cross that's there at the bottom. So at some point in time, the Catholics put a monument up in order to sort of commemorate this Prague castle defenestration, trying to get out of a window. It's weird. It's not the last time somebody will be thrown from a place in Czech history. We'll talk about that. So this Bohemian conflict that breaks out is between Emperor Ferdinand, and then there is this group of Catholic states within the Holy Roman Empire that formed in order to oppose the Protestant union that had been formed by Frederick of the Palatinate. And so it's the emperor and a group of pro-Catholic states coming together with money from the Pope. The Pope is really excited that somebody's taking up a military cause to try to do away with Protestantism. So the Pope sends them money. And they are opposed by those Bohemian nobles who had just tried to throw these officials out of a window, and Frederick of the Palatinate, the guy who had the Protestant Union. He sees this as kind of like a chance for him to make a power grab, to support fellow Protestants, and perhaps become, and he does, the next king of Bohemia. Now the Dutch had just fought a long war against the Spanish Habsburgs, and that had ended up in a kind of truce for a while, and they were worried about the cause of international Protestantism, and so the Dutch send some money with Frederick and to the Bohemians to kind of support them. So it's a Protestant versus Catholic fight, but it's also a emperor or king versus nobles fight, with a little bit of international support, at least international money. There's Frederick, elector of the Palatinate. When he agrees to support the Bohemian nobles say, well, we're going to elect you to be our king. In a way, Bohemia has two kings at this point in time. It's kind of like what happened when there were two popes. King Frederick V, elector of the Palatinate, but also what they call Winter King of Bohemia. Can you imagine why they called him Winter King? He gets elected in the winter, and that's all he lasts. Yeah, that's all he lasts. He's not in power for very long, because he brings his troops to Bohemia, and Ferdinand brings his troops to Bohemia, and they have a very large battle, a battle that's actually quite famous in the Czech Republic. If you're ever talking to a Czech person and you want to impress them, you can kind of commiserate with them about the Battle of White Mountain. Mention the Battle of White Mountain, and they'll be very impressed. At the Battle of White Mountain, the Holy Roman Emperor and semi-king of Bohemia, Ferdinand, defeated the newly elected king of Bohemia, Frederick. The Catholic king beats the Protestant king. And then Ferdinand gets really excited about that. He decides to execute a number of the Bohemian nobles who had opposed him. You want to control the nobles? A really good way of doing that is killing them. And then he gives their lands to people who had supported him. And he forces everyone then in Bohemia to become Catholic. Once again, it's illegal. He's not supposed to be doing this. But might makes right, and he gets it done. The Winter King, meanwhile, Frederick, fled. He went to the Netherlands, where he kind of caught a plague and died. Catholic troops swarm over his territory that he came from, the Palatinate. They conquer it, and they make it Catholic as well. So this is the end of the Bohemian phase of the 30 Years' War. Who wins it? Who? Catholics, yeah. Catholics and the forces of the emperor or the monarch. Well, there are a number of people when the monarch or when the Catholics start to get powerful, oftentimes somebody steps up and says, whoa, wait a second, we can't have that happening. And that's basically what the next phase of this war is. It's a Danish phase. There's a Danish king, Christian IV, who sees what's going on to Protestants in the Holy Roman Empire and sees what's going on with territory being put under the control of the Holy Roman Emperor and so on. And this king decides to raise an army and fight against the Holy Roman Empire, or fight against the emperor. Support perhaps Protestant people, Lutherans within the Holy Roman Empire. And he's also hoping to do number 5, which is just what, good new monarchs try to do at this point in time, grab some territory. It's a win-win-win for him if he can actually win. He invades the northern part of the Holy Roman Empire, but he's not successful. He doesn't win. He loses. In fact, he loses to this guy. This guy is someone that you might have never heard of before. Albrecht von Wallenstein is kind of a mysterious figure in European history. Albrecht von Wallenstein is kind of an organizational genius. What he does is organize a very large army for the Holy Roman Emperor. He basically goes to Ferdinand and says, Your Majesty, will you give me permission to recruit troops? They'll fight for you. And Ferdinand says, You'll do that for me? He says, and Albrecht von Wallenstein says, Of course I will. And so that happens. He's hugely successful at getting troops to join his army, and he creates probably the largest army that the world had seen or that Europe had seen up to that point in time. Something like 125,000 soldiers. He takes this army that he's recruited himself, marches across the Holy Roman Empire, defeats the Danes, sacking towns, taking over territories, becoming himself hugely wealthy, to the point where he might have even been more powerful than the emperor. He has a larger army than the emperor. He's got more wealth than the emperor. And like I said, he's a bit of a scary figure. The emperor is so pleased with him that he gives him about a quarter of the lands in Bohemia and considers him to be his right-hand man, his reason for success. Well, if this ends the Danish phase, who's won the Danish phase? Catholics again, right? And the emperor again. And things are really looking great for perhaps creating a Holy Roman Empire that's solidly Catholic and then under the great control of the Holy Roman Emperor. Ferdinand feels really good about his fortunes. We're about halfway, he doesn't know we're almost halfway through the 30-Year War, but much of northern parts of the Holy Roman Empire have been conquered by Wallenstein at this point in time. So he's thinking, wow, what am I going to do? Should I centralize everything? Should I Catholicize everything? Should I bring the Catholic Reformation? Tell all of the princes who are Lutheran that they have to become Catholic? His wildest dreams are coming true. He asks for advice from the Jesuits. Jesuits are very smart, Catholic Reformation guys, and the Jesuits have a suggestion for him. They say, well, why don't you pronounce an edict, or why don't you pronounce a law that basically says we're going to start to move back towards Catholicism. And this thing is called the Edict of Restitution. Attention Holy Roman Empire, we want you to become Catholic again. That freaks out a lot of people within the Holy Roman Empire and outside of the Holy Roman Empire. The German princes who are Lutheran, in fact, some of them who are Catholic are worried about this. They think that the emperor is getting too powerful. The English are worried about this. At this point in time, the English are Anglican. Church of England, they're Protestant. The Dutch are Calvinist for the most part. They're Protestant. The French are Catholic. They fought their own war of religion. They have a bit of toleration going on for a period of time. But the French are worried about the Holy Roman Empire becoming a new monarchy, becoming a powerful state where the emperor says, that they can have taxes and that they can have an army that everybody belongs to and that the emperor can make all these decisions. So the French are worried even though they're Catholic, and the Danes are still worried even having been recently defeated. This causes the third phase to start, and in particular, it's one individual who starts the third phase. Let's see, the first one was the B for Bohemian, the second one was the D for Dutch, and the third one is the Swedish. Swedish, right, okay. Well, this Swedish phase starts with the guy who was at college, Gustavus Adolphus, deciding to intervene in this conflict. He's up in Sweden. He's a Lutheran. He is, when he decides to invade the Holy Roman Empire with his Swedish army, there are people who are throwing money at him. The Dutch are throwing money at him. The French are throwing money at him. They're saying, you take this money, use it, have your troops go in, and maybe win some territory back from Protestantism, take some power away from the Holy Roman Emperor. So he's being paid to do this. If he wins, he's going to be grabbing land in the Holy Roman Empire and being able to control that. That's number 5, once again, with the new monarchies. And he's really devoutly Lutheran. He truly believes in Lutheranism. He wants other Lutherans to live safely and be able to practice that religion as well. And this works out really quite nicely for Gustavus Adolphus and for the Protestants in the Holy Roman Empire. His troops are really quite effective. They're different than Wallenstein's troops. Wallenstein's troops are actually recruited oftentimes under the threat of death. So Wallenstein will take over a town, and he'll put a whole bunch of nooses up, hanging from trees, and he'll say, "Attention, men of this town, between, let's say, 16 and 30. Would you like to join my army, or would you like to hang from this tree?" And most of them say, "We'd like to join your army." And then once they get into the army, they're kind of a rabble and thugs, but it seems to work out for them. These troops are really quite different. These troops are very disciplined. They listen to Gustavus Adolphus. They listen to their commanders, and they don't always sack everything and destroy everything like some of these Catholic forces do, or some of the mercenary forces just in general. Gustavus has great troops. And they're not just fighting because they were told they were going to hang from a tree if they didn't, or they're not just fighting because they want to make money off of this. They're fighting for their Lutheran faith. They're fighting for their king. They're really well trained. You can imagine that just grabbing a bunch of guys from a village or a town and saying, "You're joining the army, you can fight," that doesn't lead to a super high quality army. Well, Gustavus' troops are trained by Gustavus Adolphus, well controlled, well supplied, and he's got some great tactics that he comes up with. So the Swedes are really pretty successful for a time. Sadly, though, for Gustavus Adolphus, he is a very vain person. He's supposed to wear something of a kind of a newfangled technology. Not everybody has it, just sort of the elite. He can wear eyeglasses. But he doesn't want to wear eyeglasses because, it makes you look different. And so he rides into battle without his glasses on. He gets separated from his troops. He gets shot a couple of times, and he dies at this particular battle that you can see on the screen. This is the Battle of Lutzen. Now his troops win, and then they continue to win for years beyond this, but their leader's gone, and other people are going to take over. By the way, can you see the town in the background of that image? Can you see what's happening to the town? It's being burned, yeah. And that happens a lot. The 30 Years' War is really, really hard on the local populaces. Towns are burned, places are burned so that an army doesn't have a place to stay over the winter. Food is stolen from the local people. Their valuables are stolen. And time again, all these armies march through the same territories, stealing food, killing people, bringing disease. It's very, very hard on the people. Well, Ferdinand is desperate now because now the war is turning against him. Instead of winning the Bohemian phase and winning the Danish phase, he's starting to lose the Swedish phase. So he decides to, maybe calm things down by rescinding or taking back this Edict of Restitution, making people realize that he's not going to take away their Lutheranism after all. And then his troops start to be a little bit more successful as well. The Protestants and the Swedes were defeated in 1634. And the German princes say, well, if you're not going to take away our Lutheranism, well, there's really not much of a reason for us to fight you anymore. And they want to, they want to accept an amnesty that the emperor is offering. At this point in time, too, Albrecht von Wallenstein, this is this image here on the left, was called back into service to try to defeat the Swedes and try to defeat the Lutheran princes. He seems to have gone kind of rogue on his own, and maybe was trying to become Holy Roman Emperor himself. Anyway, the emperor has him assassinated. Those are some of his men killing Albrecht von Wallenstein, and then the emperor is going to be able to take over his lands and as well. Well, the French look at what's happening in this war. They saw that the Catholics won the first bit of the war, and then they saw Protestants coming along and sort of fighting back and bringing things to a kind of a standstill. And now it seems like the whole war is starting to die down, and the Holy Roman Emperor has gained some territories, he's gained some wealth, he's gained some power, and they feel kind of sad that the war is dying down. And so they decide to get involved themselves. Once again, it's a little weird because they're Catholic. In fact, they're being run by a cardinal at this point in time. There's a French king, but he doesn't do much. So a Catholic cardinal, decides to join the 30 Years' War on the side of the Protestants to keep the war going for another 15 years or so.
So would they want the war to continue?
Because they're worried about being surrounded by the Habsburgs. The Habsburgs are, the people who control Spain and are their great rival. And now the Habsburgs, of course, are in the Holy Roman Empire, or Germany, also on their border. And they're worried just about being surrounded by Habsburgs and being attacked by the Habsburgs, which happens actually pretty frequently. So the French, not only do they invade the Holy Roman Empire, they also try to mess with the Spanish Habsburgs by supporting the Portuguese against the Spanish, and by supporting some separatist movements in Catalonia to try to break away from the Spanish monarchy. The Spanish respond by trying to invade France. It's starting to break out into a much bigger war than just a war within the Holy Roman Empire. But really, things are starting to come to an end. A lot of the people within the Holy Roman Empire, as I said, are miserable. It's been almost 30 years of fighting and lots of death and destruction that I'll talk about in a second. They start to have peace talks, but there are so many different elements. There's so many different people who have to sit at the peace table. And then battles are continuing, and one side wins a battle and they demand more from the other side. The other side wins a battle, they demand more. Anyway, 4 years of peace talks before they finally work things out. Really, like I said, bad swordfish. It's like eating a terrible dinner and awful things are happening to you. Germany, if we want to call it that at this point in time, loses about a third of its population. Some 7 million people die in this 30-year period of time. You can see on this chart here the population loss. This sort of brownish reddish color is over 50%. This is the Palatinate. This is where the Frederick came from, and the place that gets taken over by Catholics. This purplish color is 41 to 50% of the population no longer in existence, 30 years after the war begins. So really, really horrible, horrible stuff is going on. About 300,000 people are killed in over 30 years. By modern standards, that's not a lot. What's really damaging is the way that this war is fought with the kind of troops that Wallenstein is raising, where you have, they're not being supplied by a central authority like Gustavus Adolphus's are. So they, like I said, they just take what they want, what they need from the local populace. Undisciplined troops had robbed and burned and looted, done whatever they wanted to local populations. When a town is taken over, it's thoroughly sacked. It's, the people there just have no defense against these marauding soldiers. It's really a horrible thing. So millions of people, 7 million people, died of malnutrition, disease, violence. It really wrecks Germany for a number of years. It really would have been a very different Europe had the Holy Roman Emperor won this, created a new monarchy, Germany, and not had his, had the Holy Roman Empire wrecked like it was. In the end, there's a peace treaty that deals with a lot of different things. It deals with political matters, it deals with diplomatic matters, it deals with religious matters. And it's important to remember the religious outcome in particular. But really, I think there are really two big outcomes that I'll tell you about in just a second, but I'll give you a bunch of little outcomes as well. Here's one of the top 3 things that happens. The Holy Roman Empire remains decentralized. It doesn't become a new monarchy. The next most important thing, I think, is that third bit there, where there's this religious toleration that exists. They return to the Peace of Augsburg, he who rules his religion, but they allow that to be for Catholics and Lutherans, like the original Peace of Augsburg was, but then also for Calvinists. Religious toleration. At this point in time, Spain is starting to decline, and France is starting to overtake it as the greatest European power. And France will remain the greatest European power until about 1815. This is the decline of Spain and the rise of France. There are a bunch of territorial adjustments. Sweden gets a little bit of territory, and the French get a little bit of territory, and within the Holy Roman Empire, different rulers are grabbing or losing territory. It's not that big of a deal for us. The Dutch start to take Spice Islands away from the Portuguese. This happened during this conflict, and they're able to continue to hold on to them. So the Dutch have these overseas possessions that they didn't have before. A place called Prussia Brandenburg got some territory, and you might be thinking, why do I care about Prussia Brandenburg? What is that? Who are they? And I'll just to kind of make it easy on you, Prussia Brandenburg is someday Germany. It's sort of like the seed of Germany. And so this backwater of a territory gets a little bit of additional territory and starts its rise to greatness and becoming the new power known as Germany. Finally, this is the last war with an overtly religious component. Now, I know that it seemed like it wasn't completely about religion because Catholics are fighting against Catholics. But after this, nobody really cares so much about which side is Protestant, which side is Catholic. There's going to be a lot more wars, but it isn't about, it isn't primarily or even secondarily about religion anymore. It's always about territory and power, which is something that obviously this conflict is about too. In fact, the DBQ that you have asks that question. If you look at the DBQ, it wants you to figure out is the 30 Years' War a political conflict or is it a religious conflict? So this is what the map looks like in 1648. You can see in the middle there isn't just one color where it says Germany or one color where it says Holy Roman Empire. It's a bunch of tiny territories still. And Spain and France and so on.